Your next sculpture challenge is going to be using clay and the appropriate building techniques to create a maquette of a formalistic sculpture. So a maquette is a French word for scale model. It's a small scale model or rough draft of a sculpture. An equivalent term is bozzetto from the Italian word which means sketch. It's used to visualize and test shapes and ideas without incurring the cost and effort of producing a full-scale product. So for commissioned sculptures, especially monumental public sculptures, a maquette can be used to show the client how the finished work would fit in the proposed site. We're going to use clay today to do this, and we're going to focus on formalism. Formalism emphasizes the form or structural qualities of a work over its content or context. Formalist sculpture's primary emphasis is in the relationship of shapes and the lines those shapes make. So, you're going to create a formalistic sculpture, but it's going to be a maquette, so it's going to be very small. So we're going to start with a small piece of clay. But before we work with the clay, you're going to have to think about what form are you going to focus on. So go around the room, look at different still life items, or you can Google images and think about what you want to base your sculpture from. So what I did was I looked at a picture of this dog here. And you can see this dog has very large ears. So I decided to base my formalistic sculpture on the ears of the dog. Now you can draw them out first if you're more comfortable doing that, or if you just want to look at it and make your formalistic sculpture by observing the image, that's fine too. You can do either one. So the first thing you're going to do is get your clay. You just need a small amount of clay. Make sure that you wedge your clay first. So I'm going to get those air bubbles out. If you need a reminder how to wedge the clay, there is a video on wedging clay that you can take a look at. So get your clay wedged, get the air bubbles out, particles aligned, and then you're going to create at least 5 of the forms that you chose. So I chose the ear of the dog. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the clay and create the form. Now remember, this is a form. We don't want to have a flat piece. So for example, I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't make a flat piece like this and then cut out a flat dog ear like this. Okay? We want it to be a form. So I am making this as three-dimensional as possible. So I might work on a shape something like this. Okay, you're going to need to make at least 5 of them. You can make them in all different sizes. They don't have to be all the same size. You can large, medium, small, whatever you like. They can be the same size if you want. But first things first, make your 5 or more forms. The forms do all need to be the same. Their scale can be different, but they need to be the same form. Okay? Once you've made 5 of those, then we're going to work with them. But a few things to remember about the clay. Remember that if the clay is like this, has little cracks in it, you can use your fingers to smooth. You can use a tool like this to smooth the clay out. If it's getting a little bit dry, you can put a little bit of slip on your finger and rub it on there to soften the clay a little bit. I wouldn't put too much on there because you don't want it gooey. Okay? And if you have a form that's too large and solid, you're going to have to make it hollow. But in this exercise, we're making a maquette, so we don't need to worry about that. So this form here is okay if it's solid. We don't have to hollow it out, and you won't need to hollow yours out either because our pieces will be pretty small. But just as a reminder later, if you're making something larger, that you would have to hollow it out before moving on, because if it's too thick, the air and moisture gets trapped in the clay, and when it goes in the kiln, it will escape and break your clay. Okay, so I have here some of the forms that I made. These are already fired, but I made several of the ear forms, and you can see I made them sort of in size order here. All right, your next task, and you're going to do this with wet clay, not with the fired clay. I'm just showing you with the fired clay. Your next task is to arrange them and decide on a sculpture. So you're going to be working with them and just say, okay, well, what do I want to make with these forms? What kind of sculpture do I want to make? And you're going to play around with the forms, try all different things, get lots of ideas. Don't settle on your first idea. See what kind of things you can come up with. And remember, as you're working, you're not going to slip and score these together yet. You're just working to get ideas for your sculpture. Okay, so you'll work with your pieces until you decide what you want. Once you've figured it out, then you're going to slip and score together. So if this is one of your pieces and you have a second one, let's get a second one put together real quick here. You're going to have to slip and score them together. So to do that, and I'm obviously doing this very quickly, you'll take a little more time on yours. Okay, if you're going to slip and score them together, let's say for example I decide that I want these two like this, or I want this one to be like this, I need to scratch the surface on both areas. I need to put a little bit of slip on both. I usually like to scratch it again a little bit to mix that slip in, and press them and connect. And that's how you would connect pieces. Okay? So for my example, I decided to put them in this shape. So this was my finished maquette of my formalistic sculpture. And it's glazed and fired. Whoops. It was broken, so I glued it. It goes like this. Something to remember is this is a maquette, so you can imagine a person, tiny, tiny little person, depending on what the scale is. Maybe the person is only standing this tall, and imagine what it would be like to walk through and experience this sculpture as a person. You know, maybe this piece here might be 20 feet tall. Okay, and that is the maquette sculpture challenge. Okay, you should be able to finish the sculpture in one class period, the wet clay part. The glazing will happen in a different class period.